What is up? This is the Keyholing podcast. I'm your host, Lemon, and today with me I've got Armed Joy, Mags, and we're going to talk about why gun control is racist and sexist, and maybe help people confront some issues they have with admitting that. Because a lot of people on both sides deny it, and I mean, both sides, quotations. And so you actually wrote a paper about this for a college class, correct?
Yes, it was just for a random English requirement for my degree, and I decided that I was going to go nuclear and just write a paper about something that I already felt and I know would make people, the type of people that run in college faculty mad. And I realized it all went a lot deeper than I thought, and the research there is very fascinating, and there's a lot of angles that people don't pull on, and we can get into reasons why they don't pull on those angles. So, yeah, I was only supposed to be like a 5-page paper, and I ended up writing like 24 or something. So this is even the cut down version of that.
And you did get in trouble, correct? Like you actually got like kind of like finger wagged for writing this much about it even. Not only
Yeah,
the topic
I
but this
provided
much.
too many citations, and my paper was too long.
Come on now. Like do you want me to do the work or not, right? Like
Yeah, and this is the extreme cut down version, and I was still too long.
so the first question you kind of bring up is, does gun control legislation disproportionately affect people of color and other at-risk groups? And what, like, not to like, I don't want to like gloss over the whole thing here, but like what conclusion did you come to with that?
Absolutely. And I mean, you don't even have to really get into the data and everything else we're going to go through in this to draw that conclusion. It's a simple fact of demographics and geography. Who enforces gun control? The police. Where are the most police and the most people? In the cities. Where are the most minority populations? In the cities. So thus, who is gun control going to affect the most? Minorities. It's a pretty obvious, straightforward thing. And then you only build, that's skipping anything that comes with racism or institutionalized oppression. So just from the very starting point, you can't deny that. And then you just build on all of the history and all the facts that have been going on from there.
Absolutely. And something I briefly want to touch on with that is the move away from community policing, right? Like it is also you have these largely white cops in suburbs who don't even live in these areas, in these cities, policing these areas. And your first mention here is the classic one I mentioned last episode with Vega, the Mulford Act. That's the one people go to a lot, and it's true, very true. Reagan, the NRA, Republicans, quite a few Republicans in multiple states were a part of this gun control push. However, this is recent history as well. Like, can you like talk about that? Like, I think something people do is to write it off in a way to be like, oh, that was a long time ago. That was now it's different, and you kind of start that bring that up here with Project Safe Neighborhoods. But if you could just talk about that a little bit, it being actually current day.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and it's something that both people who, people like us that say that gun control is racist and people that oppose it both kind of fall into is they'll talk about the Mulford Act, they'll talk about the Fugitive Slave Acts, they'll talk about all the anti-carry laws that came out during Reconstruction, and they'll say, "Oh, that was a really long time ago." Is the kind of cope with that, but none of this really went away during the American troubles, we can call them, in the 60s to like the early 90s. It all just continued onward. It's just they weren't you well, I was going to say they weren't as obviously transparent with it, but we'll come to an example with our favorite person, Michael Bloomberg, later on in the paper, where it's pretty transparent, where a guy just straight says we need to take the guns from black people. But you know you're right that this did continue onwards, and these people are still in power. You have Project Safe Neighborhoods, which is an initiative that still exists today and was supported by the NRA and the NSF and Gabby, well, not Gabby Gilbert's Brady Group. And the entire thing of Project Safe Neighborhoods was this idea of mandatory minimum sentencing federal charges for any crime committed in the presence of a firearm. It was essentially a tough on guns, tough on crime program. And the entire justification for it was avoiding so-called Cleveland juries, as the supporters of this called it at the time, where they would take people that committed a crime in Florida or something, and they would immediately shoot it up to federal court and push for mandatory sentencing, which is why Matt from Floodbusters, he talks about it a lot. A significant portion of our federal prison population is there on gun charges, but it's not all like a surprising number of those are not using a gun in a crime. It is the presence of a gun during a crime. And people will kind of cope this away and be like, well, yeah, if you broke into a house and had a gun on you, even if you didn't use that gun, it makes sense that you'd be charged for it. But it's the sort of thing as, things as simple as you got into a fight outside of a bar and it was a mutually combative situation and everyone there got arrested and you had a gun in your backpack. You never used the gun, you never brandished the gun, you never flashed the gun. But under Project Safe Neighborhoods, you would immediately go to a federal court in DC. You would immediately face, mandatory prison sentencing for that, and then you would catch a felony, even if what you did was not a felony in your state. And that's very important because it's much easier to pop somebody on repeated gun felonies when they're a felon and you're not supposed to have a gun. So it just creates this entire infinite cycle. And that quotation of "we need to avoid Cleveland juries," it's very obvious what they're saying there. You don't have to read between the lines very hard of who this was targeting and why this existed.
No, definitely, and you can even see today who it's targeting, right? Like a lot of the people in the gun group are in the gun community, if you want to call it that, are pro ICE, right? Have been pro DHS, basically when it's under the good team, and they're using Project Safe Neighborhoods. The Department of Homeland Security is using today Project Safe Neighborhoods to justify raids in specific places, to justify. We've seen, and I mean, anyone could go look it up. I don't have them pulled up. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel tweeting illegal firearms seized, illegal 50 illegal firearms seized from criminals, and that's been something
We've
they've been.
talked about it. We've talked about it too. Of like, even if you're a conservative person, even if you love ICE, like, do you not find it odd that they feel the need to highlight the firearm in every single tweet and announcement they do about arrests? It's never like we got these many rapists or we got these many drug runners or whatever would make more sense in the context thing. It's we arrested 64 people and we took 300 guns off the street, and it's like, hmm.
Yeah, and
Why do you keep highlighting that statistic? Why is that statistic so important to you? And it's like, yeah, it's because it's all coming from the same nonsense.
absolutely, and some people have been catching on, like coyly replying, like, "What is it? What's an illegal firearm?" Under their tweets, which is funny, but they really need to scratch further on that to see the full story and see these policies are being used there by the uniparty, by the left, by the right. This is the You could put Nancy Pelosi on those tweets. You could put Joe Biden on those tweets. It doesn't matter what political figure's tweeting it. They all want the same things. And something else Matt talks about as far as the gun rights issue and making people felons is your right being taken away forever. And as we talk about this, we're going to be brushing over a lot of numbers, brushing over a lot of cases. Like, we can't possibly cover, like, but some of the stuff I'm talking about is going to go back over 100 years. And I want people to think about all the people that ended their lives and are in cages today because they had a gun, because a gun was in a car with them and they were a passenger in a car or something. Like, that's an actual reality. The state is bragging about it right now, and sadly, the gun community is cheering them on.
Yeah, and I wanna kind of sidebar here because I have a unique obsession and hatred with the concept of red flag laws. If
Mm-hmm.
anyone listening, you probably know what a red flag law is, but I'll just explain. This is the concept that states can temporarily, massive quotations around that, take firearms away from people that are deemed dangerous to themselves or others without a warrant or a criminal charge or anything like that. It depends on states. Some places it requires a doctor and a judge to sign off on it. Some places it requires only a doctor or only a judge. Some places the police can do it and can be the conditioner, which that's just an obvious massive pull. And when you talk about that, a thing that's really overlooked, and it kind of goes to my point in the beginning of people not turning over some stones that are very interesting, is I found a bunch of papers from the University of Michigan and other places written by liberals who support gun control. That's very important that these papers are. And they are going into the statistics about red flag laws and how they affect minority populations. Now, I know a bunch of pro-gun people probably didn't read this because they see something and they're like, "Oh, this is probably a Giffords hit piece. It's full of a bunch of stupid stats, and I'm not going to read this study." I don't have that, I don't have that issue. I will happily read all the nonsense they put out, and I'm glad that I read these papers because they're actually, they're having cognitive dissonance because they want to support this program really, really badly. But the data clearly and transparently says that at least on the West Coast, I think the paper covered like California, Washington, and Oregon. At least on the West Coast, ERPOs is the other word for red flag laws, are being primarily used against Black people. And there's some very interesting points in there. When it comes to they go through all the stats. The people who were red flagged and then later on did anything to hurt themselves or other people, basically none of the Black people they got did that. There was like two white guys and one Hispanic guy that harmed themselves later out of hundreds of people. So that's already, a nightmare statistic. Then they go on to say, ERPOs and red flag laws are not an arrestable offense. You didn't commit a crime. The cops can't, arrest you for this. They're supposed to just come and take your guns away. If you think about that for a second, it's kind of stupid, but that's how it's supposed to work. And yet, with Black people in particular, over half of the people that got red flagged got arrested during the act regardless, which is not supposed to happen. And then you go on further to that, to only 1/3 of these people ever get their guns back, which red flag's supposed to be temporary. These people didn't hurt themselves. So they're supposed to get their guns back. But it costs a lot of money in court time to do that. So most of these, only 1/3 of these people ever get them back. And then you get to the final horrific detail of it, I think the statistic is 94%, or no, actually I was right on the screen, 97% of the petitioners in these ERPO, cases were the police, which that's a big conflict of interest there if you think about it. So by ignoring kind of, the shit libby to call them research papers, we don't realize from the other side of this that even they can't bring themselves to say that it's bad, but they're acknowledging that there's a massive racial problem. And their cope is like, well, we just need to make it like less racist, but continue to do this program because they don't get what's going on here.
Yeah, their problem is with the result. Their problem is that the numbers look racist, which isn't what they wanted, right? And the next sentence here: a study on Indiana's experience with ERPOs found that many respondents faced arrests even though ERPOs are not considered criminal charges. So basically, a large percentage of these cases are brought on by cops. That your guns are taken and you are arrested even though you have done nothing criminally wrong.
And some of these places do not require forewarning whatsoever. So put yourself in your shoes of like, you're a Black guy, you live in Indianapolis downtown, and one day you get a knock on the door and it's the police, and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. This is bizarre. And you open the door and the cops say you need to hand over all your firearms. And that is from that point forward, that is the only time you were even aware that this is happening. And it's a complicated process, and it's what red flag is usually something that only gun people really get into the weeds of. So if you're not like an online super informed gun person, you might be very confused on what the hell is even happening. And, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's also very far from rare that this results in a confrontation with the police and the gun owner being shot and killed by the cops because they're essentially being ambushed and they're being told, hand over your property. And when you ask why, well, I'm red flagging you and well, show me a warrant. There is no warrant. That's not how this works. You're not under arrest, but you have to turn over your guns or we're going to beat the hell out of you and arrest you, which is just, it's a nightmare evil prospect. And it is flagrantly being used on one particular group of people more. Now obviously that's these are just Indiana, California, Washington, Oregon I looked at. Places like Florida, that's not the case, or Maryland, it is mostly it's more balanced or more white people, which is very interesting when you think about it, to where it seems to be less of a problem in like purple and red states, so that the blue states are super racist. But then the blue states are turning around and being like, well, we don't like that it's racist, but we're also not going to overturn these laws. So it's like, what's happening here?
Yeah, pick a struggle. And
Real.
it's interesting you bring up blue state. I want to quickly go an aside into Illinois. That's happening in Illinois right now. People have their concealed carry cards. People have their FOIDs, which sounds like a weird like Groiper type slur. But a FOID. Can you explain to people what a FOID is? Your wife
Yeah,
had that one correct.
yeah, yeah. So in Illinois, it's essentially your gun permit that allows you to have a gun at all. It's not a carry permit. It just allows you to own a gun because Illinois is a fallen state. And it stands for a firearms owner identification card. And, so you need a FOID card to even own a gun, and then you can get a carry permit. And, to our point before of like, this is not some weird thing that was happening in the 60s. The majority of people that are being arrested by Chicago police, despite having a FOID card, despite having a valid carry permit, are black people. And it is happening at a crazy number over there's multiple stories that have been written over the last couple of weeks of just seemingly out of nowhere, they're just popping dozens of black people who have followed like all of Illinois' Byzantine law structure to be able to legally carry a firearm to protect themselves in Chicago, which is a dangerous place. I live there. I know. It's not, the nightmare hellscape that some try to portray it as, but we live in certain areas, it's a dangerous place. And these people did everything they could to follow the law, and they're getting arrested regardless. Now, thankfully, these charges are almost unanimously being dropped after thousands of dollars and months of time are spent fighting the police who go to insane degrees to resist this and to resist giving people's guns back and resist dropping charges, all while these people are doing everything legal. And it just goes to the point of like, gun owners are treated as, in general, I believe white, black, brown, whatever. I think gun owners are treated as criminals first, and questions are only asked later by the police. You add a racial element into it, and you're only doubling down on that problem, and that's kind of where we are.
100%. Cops go into these interactions predetermined. I highly suggest people go watch the video on the recent cases Mags is talking about, because you see the cops on video saying, the person literally pulls up an email showing, I renewed this. Here's my receipt. Here's my, like, it's your name. It says the date and everything. And the cop's like, nah, we can't take that. We gotta, even though then they ask later, they ask the DA, oh no, they should have taken that. Well, too late. That person's already spent money, time, lost out on any job opportunities they had in these cases. One guy had a small business and missed a meeting. And not to mention, being locked in a cage, even if it's for a day, is bullshit. It's total bullshit. And you're right, adding this racial element to a situation where gun owners are already treated as criminals, which, not to go too far off the path, but that's why our view is, and I can speak for Max here, the thin blue line, pro cop is not compatible with being pro gun. It's simply not. Gun owners.
Yeah, like if there was an instance where the police, because you always see these things, and I will give credit for this and this alone, where you'll see sheriffs or counties be like, we're not enforcing this gun control law, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but none of those places have ever had to put up or shut up on it. And until that happens, it's like, well, that's a nice gesture, but what are you doing when state police comes and arrests somebody like this in your county? Are you doing anything about that? Is there any degree of resistance or protest or anything? That hasn't happened yet. And outside of that tiny, barely, effectual example, it doesn't exist. Cops will go on all the time about, oh, well, I'm pro gun, I'm pro gun. Well, if you're an Illinois cop, you're arresting people for gun charges, you know?
all
So
the all the
what
time, and it's prevalent, like even in states that where like are more gun friendly, right? So like in Texas until recently, a like an extremely small amount of weed was a felony. So if you were caught with weed and a gun, you're double felonied, booked up on a Tuesday. You are cooked, brother.
Yeah, they'll happily upcharge you still,
A-
which is that's part of the problem is the gun being considered a problem. When the gun is
Absolutely.
no longer considered a problem unless the gun is being used in a way that facilitates it being a problem,
Absolutely.
we have an issue here.
Absolutely. And I want to say too, real quick before we move forward into the stop and frisk stuff, we have friends who I don't want to say finish like, but we have friends who would not approach the police kindly if their door was knocked on, telling them to give up their guns. Let's just say that.
And it's happened tons of times, mostly to like old white guys, who's the type you would imagine that would go, hell no, go fuck yourself, and they get shot and killed by cops. One happened in Maryland, one happened in Florida, I think one happened in Indiana. There's a bunch of these stories of essentially they're showing up to like 60-year-old white guys and being like, "Give us your guns away," and they say, "Go fuck yourself," and get shot and killed. It's not a theoretical thing; it has happened.
No, and it happens more often than people think, and it's written off by the media, and I don't want to say like the mainstream media, but like local media, even these uh, outlets owned by Sinclair and things like that. That's written off as, oh well, police went to arrest this very bad guy, and he didn't give them his guns, and so
When it
police.
wasn't supposed to be an arrest and it's not supposed to be a criminal proceeding, and the person was not informed beforehand. And he's
Ex-
like, yeah,
exactly, all those things are underlying.
drives me nuts.
And so, like, kind of as like once we go beyond, you say go beyond ERPOs here into stop and frisk. What was your like going into stop and frisk? What were your impressions of it? Like, obviously, I knew it was bad. I knew it was by Michael Bloomberg. I kind of knew in general, but even I didn't realize how bad it was until reading the statistics and your conclusions of this.
Yeah, it was absolute nightmare thing. It was gun control. That's the problem that, I've gotten pushback from both sides of the metaphorical aisle on this, of right wingers and left wingers desperately trying to say that dress stop and frisk wasn't gun control. It was gun control. It was nightmare. It did horrible things to people. It didn't work at all, despite the code. And it's led to a bunch of very interesting spirals out of it into the modern day. And to start that, I'll use a modern day example because again, everyone's like, "Oh, stop and frisk." That was the '90s and the early 2000s, maybe. Well, this is one of my favorite stories to tell because this kind of highlights all of this. Is in Colorado around, I think it was like 2018, 2019. There was a Democrat mayor in Colorado, and during the whole Stop the Steal protests and stuff like that, she had a brilliant idea to keep all these Trump people from protesting, the election. Because obviously, if you remember those times, Trump people would show up with guns and stuff to like big public parks in cities or outside state capitals and they would protest. So she just passed a simple law that banned the carry and open display of firearms in the public parks in her city in Colorado. Months later, there was a bombshell report from local press that this was being used by the police to essentially stop every single black dude in a park and just frisk them for guns. And she was horrified by this. She was like, "This is never what I wanted this program to do." But because they don't think about this, they view guns as the dirty white guy in the trailer park and he's super conservative or a Nazi. They don't, they're so bubbled that they didn't realize the second order consequences of banning firearms from a public park in an inner city with a large minority population with the police and how that would work out. And eventually that law got overturned. And that's fairly recent. So when you go back to stop and frisk, it's even more apparent that it was flagrantly racially targeted. My favorite quote in here that I'm amazed was not run by like everyone running against Bloomberg in the same way they treated Kamala, of complaining and defending himself against racial targeting of minorities through stop and frisk. And his direct quote that he said with his whole chest to the media is that we're stopping too many white people. We actually need to stop more minorities and frisk more minorities. And this statement came immediately after it was unveiled that there was rapes going on, there was molestation going on, there was flagrant like petty theft. They would just stop people on the side of the street and just run their pockets and then leave. New York police was doing this. I also have a little sidebar about here. I think it was it's been a minute since I read my own thing. But I think it was Baltimore's gun trades. Ooh, let me see. I'm scrolling. Maybe Baltimore, maybe Maryland. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. But essentially, some New England city had I think they're called Viper teams or something like that, and they were a specific like anti-gang, anti-gun task force. And there was a massive controversy over them, and they eventually got shut down because they were stopping and frisking people. They were planting drugs on them. They were stealing the guns off of them and then selling them to other criminals under the table. And just, the cops are a gang, essentially. Like people say that, but in this real case, like they were a literal gang. And that's what you find in all of these programs. They either become comically corrupt, they're horribly abusive, or often both. And that's why none of these programs end up working out.
100%. And I want to hit on a couple things. The Colorado thing's very interesting because you'll remember, and your wife Katron actually bullied New Mexico in the past. But Michelle Lujan Grisham in 2023, this would have been after the Colorado situation, tried to sign a 30-day Albuquerque gun ban, and it would have been the same result, right? Like it would have been the same people being targeted. And I wonder how much of it is you think is them being willfully ignorant, and how much of it is them just not thinking. Like, I know, I think a lot of Democrats probably don't care, but I know some of them actually do care about black people being stopped by police and are grossed out by it. But is it just a situation of out of sight, out of mind, or?
I think it's a priority thing, and I think the recent controversy over the proposed trans gun ban and all the Democrats and gun groups basically not touching it with a 100-foot pole kind of revealed at least the upper echelons. I can't talk about the street activists; it gets a little more complicated in there, but the upper echelons just want the guns gone. And it doesn't matter who gets screwed over. It doesn't matter if it gets used racially. It doesn't matter any other extraneous factors. They just want the guns gone. So if a law came out tomorrow that just said black people can't own guns anymore, they would be maybe uncomfortable with it, but it would be a bigger step towards their goal, and they would either be quiet about it or have very pussyfooty kind of opposition to it, because it's just a matter of priority. If you are a minority in this country, you are on a lower rung than the desire to simply get rid of the firearms. And you see, it's not racially motivated, this part of it, but just last week there was a massive drama of Everytown, another large anti-gun organization, running a safety program. And their organization is literally called Everytown for Gun Safety. And they were going to run a nonsense, but still gun safety class. The overwhelming majority of prior activists and even some of their board members revolted over this and said it was horrible and a nightmare because they are opposed to the mere concept of guns. These are the same people that have banned making finger gun gestures in sports. These are the people that are going into old movies and editing firearms out. There's another drama last week of Amazon now owns the James Bond franchise, and they were editing the firearms out of all of the posters for these James Bond movies. That's the level of like psychotic fear, hatred, and desire to destroy a metaphorical concept of a firearm. So when you realize they're willing to go that far, in the instance of the trans gun ban, it's like, well, they're going to take guns away from all trans people, but it's like, but they're taking guns, and that's the important part. That's I feel like that's their thought process. They
No,
cope it away.
I think you're totally right. I think it is by the majority of those anti-gunners viewed as like a necessary evil type of thing. Like, oh, if they start with the trans and blacks, then eventually they'll get to everyone. And I think it is. I'm glad you bring up Everytown because I kind of want to connect them in here. And you talked about police being a gang. This is still, again, like we're emphasizing today. In 2024, Edward Caban knocking over parts kits here. Edward Caban was the New York City police commissioner appointed by Eric Adams. And he was dismissed for shaking up clubs. Like, they were providing, in quotes, security to clubs, and if they didn't pay for it, they were getting shaken down by cops. And it's like, if cops are doing that to businesses, they're obviously doing that to individuals. And one thing we get really frustrated with, and it is the Everytown and Brady tweeting cop violence is gun violence, and that bullshit line of we hate to see this. We no more violence against black people when cops shoot a black person. And then they're advocating for these same cops to have a monopoly on power.
Yeah, and they go even farther where they're friends with these people. They're anti-police. Anything they tweet is the most performative nonsense you could ever imagine, because it's not a conspiracy theory. It's well known at this point that when you get an anti-gun bill that hits like a state house or something like that, it is written by Everytown. It is written by Mom's Demand. It's written by Brady. We've literally seen moments where they've had to do quick amendments to these bills because something wouldn't pass or it was a hot state fight. And the Democrat senators will literally run over to the Everytown people and the orange shirt wearing Mom's Demand people and quickly discuss and write things down and edit the bill on the fly. They're the ones writing these bills. And they leave an exemption to police in every single bill, no matter what it is. Even if it's something that wouldn't even affect law enforcement, they leave an exemption to it. There was a weird bill in, I think, New York about, being able to pass down your firearms to your children. That doesn't affect law enforcement. Not being able to give my gun to my kid when I die does not affect law enforcement duties whatsoever. Everytown still wrote an exemption to the police in that. And even further than that, I'm heavily involved now in the fight for constitutional carry in a lot of different states. And when you go into the constitutional carry fight, Everytown and Brady and all these people, their best friends are the police unions. Their best friends are the sheriff's departments in these instances. They will call them on stage at their rallies to speak against this. So anytime they say anything anti-police or critical of the police, it is nonsense. These people are their friends, fundamentally top to bottom. They write safety provisions into the law for them. They hang out with them. They communicate with them regularly. They invite them to their events. Like it's very easy to say that all the anti-gun organizations are pro-police organizations.
And with those exemptions for police, you get these police who, and it's not only it's not only the gun control groups that contribute to this, but it is a contributing factor. You get these police that feel like they are untouchable, right? You get off-duty cops playing hero, crashing cars, killing people. You get off-duty cops shooting into crowds. You get and all these are covered under their immunity clauses. They can use guns personally that are exempt from these laws because they are exempt, and they get
and often even active and prior duty. If you were a cop before, doesn't even matter if you're active now. They write safety provisions in it for you and no one else.
Exactly, and it's crazy because these are the people who are dog shit at shooting. Uh, like they aren't even good. Like there's this idea that like cops in the military are the best shooters, and every cop is James Bond, to steal a reference from earlier, and it's just so far from the truth that it's absurd. You can search like officer involved shootings and use those words, officer involved shootings, and a large percentage of the time it's officers shooting each other, shooting their partner, shooting someone else that wasn't involved at a period. Like it's ridiculous.
Exactly.
And going into this further, your these invasive stops, 7,200 pedestrian stops reviewed by the Justice Department. 3.7% led to officers issuing criminal citations or making arrests. So basically 96% of these people were doing nothing wrong. Were
Yeah,
doing
and there, there was way too many, and that was kind of part of my much larger paper that I had to cut down. There is infinite examples of just people being repeatedly targeted and nightmare things happening to them. Women in particular, which is very fascinating that Bloomberg wanted to hide behind like, well, we're stopping too many white men and they don't do crime, but we need to stop more black men because they're doing more, he would use those kind of stats as defense. But you look into black and Hispanic women that were stopped more often than not, and you just get horrible nightmare stories that I won't even repeat happening to them, and happening to them repeatedly is the important, even more important part of that. Not just once, not just twice. Like there was, as the number says, hundreds of thousands of stops. And sometimes that would be 6 or 7 times to the same person in a month period of just constantly harassing this person, pushing them up against the wall, strip searching them, which they weren't supposed to do, but they do it anyways. And to bring it back to guns, it was to get guns primarily. The majority of things they arrested people for were possession of firearms. What they were searching for was firearms. Because this immediately came after a whole slew of anti-gun laws that passed in New York. That's what Bloomberg was targeting. And it's insane, you know, not to give him more credit than he deserves, because this is still politicking, that people would go back and be like, this wasn't gun, leftists and liberals do this to me all the time. That wasn't gun control. That was just racism and drug policy. It's like Michael Bloomberg has made statements about wanting to legalize marijuana, which, not to give too much credit, but just to lay a baseline here. He also runs the largest gun control org in the nation. So, like, what priority did you think Michael Bloomberg had with stop and frisk? It seems pretty obvious.
absolutely, and cops and women have to put it lightly, complicated history. And you're right; these stories would get banned on basically every platform. They're awful, horrible, disgusting. And what do we think happens when these cops know women are going to be unarmed? Right when they are pulling a woman over and or grabbing her and saying, "Okay, strip." And it's also a power flex, right? A power trip of I can make these women do anything. They're unarmed. They I will just arrest them if they don't comply. Write them up for numerous charges, assaulting a police officer, whatever else other bullshit they can find, and it really cascades into these other effects that you're right start with guns. So the idea is guns, and then liberals you mentioned earlier in Colorado are uncomfortable with all these effects down the line. Well, sorry fucking about you. That's what happens when you give police this power. When you tell police target people, look for guns, and they get the ability to essentially do it unimpeded, and there is no power check to them at all.
Yeah, the psychological and cultural issue we have with firearms is that we pretty much let the police get away with basically anything if there's a threat of a firearm in existence. And I don't remember if I cover it in this paper. Again, if I forget anything, I wrote this 3 years ago now. But I during the whole BLM era and stuff like that, there was multiple instances of, and in general, to be honest, of cops seeing a black dude with a gun and just open firing on him, regardless of context. It doesn't matter if they were called. It doesn't matter if the person is commissioning a crime. It doesn't matter if the person is perfectly legal. It doesn't even matter if they were doing something else. They will just open fire on minorities because, you know, there's just a firearm that exists. I think it was last year. You can look up this video. It was in California, and the cops were chasing a known gang member, and they were in a vehicle chase with him. And totally unrelated to this, there was a Hispanic guy sitting in his front yard smoking a cigarette. Now, this is Hispanic guy. He had a lighter that looked like a gun, and it was like a replica like gun lighter. But he was sitting in his own front yard, and these cops chasing someone else drove by and saw this dude sitting in his front yard with a gun, stopped and immediately opened fire on him from their car. He thankfully didn't get hurt and was able to run inside and everything. But it wouldn't be illegal if you had all the permits and annoying stuff to have guns in California to sit in your own front yard with a gun in your lap. That's not against the law. But the mere fact that they saw a minority with a firearm, they immediately opened up on them. There's another example in Ohio of I'm blanking on his name and I feel bad about it, but it was a black guy, and he had a Subway sandwich in his hand, and he had a CPL on, he had, concealed pistol, which he had a license for, tucked in his waistband but covered. A cop drove by, thought he was trying to break into this house, went up to him, and tried to arrest him. Now this guy, confused, has no idea what's going on. The cop sees his gun and opens fire on him. His gun was never unholstered, it was never pulled. There was no fight or altercation. He just like lifted his shirt up just enough the cops see the gun, and he shot and killed him. He had a CPL. He was allowed to carry that gun. He was on his own property, and he was killed over somewhere Subway sandwich. That's the kind of things we're dealing with here. Is cops view guns as an excuse to do whatever they want, and you add the racial component on top of that, and this is how you get to where we are now.
Absolutely, and that's like a classic one, and it's been guns, cell phones, anything they can claim that even might have looked like a gun. And even in California, like you're absolutely right. Like, is there anything more American than sitting on your porch with a gun? But they still stopped and shot at him, and it's actually like absurd when you think about it, because there's often this call in the gun community to say we need to be together, we need to be a unified force, and until Republicans and Democrats, obviously Republicans and Democrats acknowledge this, and I don't really care about other politics like right now in particular. I think the gun is the base politic. Until gun owners on both sides, proverbial sides, acknowledge this, there's not going to be a unified force toward less gun control. Like, period. Because Republicans on one hand want to say, well, that guy shouldn't have been sitting on his porch, or maybe the guy should have stopped when the cop tried to arrest him. And it's like, they don't have to. Right? Like, if someone comes up and mugs you as you're trying to get into your house, you should, I don't want to say what you should do, you should probably shoot them, though, right? Like, and this guy has no idea what's going on. And if you're sitting on a porch with a gun and someone stops by and shoots at you, this idea that, and it's perpetuated by the media, and both sides play into it, is that guns are bad. Minorities and poor people having them are bad. Only police.
You are up to something if you're armed. You're out to cause trouble, or whatever the many versions of that we've heard.
Absolutely. It's why do you have that? Why do you need that? What are you doing with that? It's none of your fucking business.
Yeah, like the perfect example of that I always point to, and I will give the general gun rights, and I use that very particularly, gun rights style conservatives a lot of credit. Excuse me. They've gotten a lot better on this. You saw that during the floated trans gun ban. even the NRA came out against it.
So
So I'm
much
like,
better. So much better.
yeah, so I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere. People are starting to get it. And especially, when you deal with, like I said, I'm involved very heavily with the constitutional carry fight. The constitutional carry fight, that, again, affects minorities a lot when it comes to the whole nonsense with permitting and sensitive places and having to get a permit in different places and travel. That affects them greatly. And there's actually a very interesting study where I posted about it a couple weeks ago of different races and their opinions on different gun control and pro-gun kind of things. And unsurprisingly, Black people and Hispanic people were the highest among support for constitutional carry. And it was actually the lowest in whites, which was very interesting data to me, which kind of tells you how this kind of affects those sort of people. You should be able to just carry a gun without a license to carry a gun and without having to show or anything or reach in your pockets in front of a cop to prove you can have that gun. That's very important to them for obvious reasons. And I always go to what happened in Minneapolis during the George Floyd whole shindig and everything that was going down, where you had, and I'm horrible with names, so I forget his name too, but you had this black guy. He was downtown in a parking lot with his friends after curfew, and they were getting up to leave Minneapolis because shit was going down. It was nighttime during that period. The riot police were driving around an unmarked van, an unmarked white van, shooting out the doors and windows non-lethal at people who had not gone home yet for curfew. This guy standing behind his truck in the middle of the night in Minneapolis while riots are going on sees a white van drive by and opened fire on him and his friends. So he pulls out a rifle and shoots the shit out of his van. Didn't hit any of the cops, and that's probably the only thing that kept him out of jail, unfortunately, is that he didn't hit anybody. The cops jumped out and beat the hell out of him. Now, thankfully, it went through court, and he ended up winning like $1 million, and he got no charges. Because, again, as a gun person, you are downtown in a city, there's rioting going on, and you are taking fire from an unmarked white van. What are you as a gun owner going to do? And like I was saying before, thankfully most of the pro-gun conservatives agree on that. They're like, yeah, I would return fire because that's an obvious thing you should do in that situation. If you have a gun on you and that's not an instance where you defend yourself, why are you even carrying a gun? But you're right to where there's still this very strong and fierce, like, conservative side, which I've always said, and I might be wrong in some instances, but I'm pretty confident in most. These people don't own firearms. The Second Amendment is like a political or ideological thing to them, but not a tangible or physical reality whatsoever. That are like, well, he shouldn't have been there. It's like, well, he lives there. He's like, well, it was after curfew. He's like, he was going home. He's like, well, why did he have a gun on him? He's like, oh, there we go. Now we've gotten to the issue.
No, absolutely, and you're right. Those are the people to first be like that subset of, oh well, I guess we're gonna have to 4473 trans people now. Make sure they're filling out the
Yeah.
form right. And
And that whole thing's insane, anyways, because people don't understand what that is. The ban on the mentally ill owning firearms, that is if you are adjudicated mentally defective. It's not if you're mentally ill.
by
You
a
can own a
court,
gun,
by a court.
yeah, by a court. You can own a gun and it's not like red flag laws. This is actually like a complicated process that very few people go through because the bar is very high. It's it's not, you can be mentally ill and own a gun. You can be depressed, you can be anxious. There's even people that have mild schizophrenia that can own firearms. And this is way worse than even the most reaching thing you could say of transgenderism being a mental issue. You're gonna say it's worse than schizophrenia, I don't believe you. And I don't even feel that way. So those people are not being mentally adjudicated defective, which tells me, and it's half joke, it's half serious of like, oh, these are like Europeans and like South American, the weird brown Nazis that we deal with all the time that don't know how things work here, and they're trying to influence American politics to become as shitty as they are on guns. And that's kind of my conspiracy theory. But you're right. They don't understand how things work. They don't actually value firearms and the right to keep and bear firearms. It's just this masculine American conservative position they have to have, but they don't actually value it whatsoever.
And I think the primary problem is that a lot of those, not a lot of, but a good amount of that group is in power, right? I think a lot of voters get duped in general by a politician taking pictures with a rifle that's never been fired with no sights on it, mag not
Yeah,
even.
MMP sport with flip down, flip ups, and a clean barrel.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it's really intriguing to see people get duped by that. And it's like, no, they're pro gun. They take picture with gun. They're pro gun, and it's like, well, that's not being pro gun.
Yeah, and we're dealing with, it's a constant, like, that's why I say the pro gun position is like a super state position where it exists outside of normal politics because you are under attack by everyone all the time if we're being honest about it. And that's why I'm only associated with people that will eagerly swing right, because you have the whole, like, the Bondi thing we talked about earlier. You have the Trump bump stock ban, the floated DOJ ban on transgenders, and all of that, and everybody kind of brings those up. But then you have more recently, when you want to talk about a racial aspect. Here we go again. All the Glock switch bans that are being passed around in red states, like deep red pro-gun states, are still banning clock, or at least trying to ban clock switches. So it's something we deal with no matter where you are, constantly. We internationally, locally, on the state level and federal. If you are a gun owner and you are trying to protect your gun rights completely and indefinitely, you are under threat by the entire political spectrum all of the time without relent.
Absolutely, and I want to hit on without relent because I think people get the idea, especially when Republicans are in power, even in red states, that oh, gun rights are fine or gun rights are good now. They're safe now. We did it, and it couldn't be further from the truth.
Oh yeah, like in Alabama right now, there is a whole cabal of county sheriffs and low-level Republican House, state House members that are trying to get a duty to inform uh, amendment put into their constitutional carry, that you have to tell a cop that you're carrying a gun if a cop stops and asks you. And that's all. There is no Democrat involved in this entire process. These are all good old boy Republicans in Alabama that we're dealing with here, and that's who is targeting on that. So you're right; it's constant, it's everywhere. Lest we bring up places like Florida, which is a hilarious place in general. I'm sure if you ever talk to Matt can go on and on about how Florida is the worst red state in the world when it comes to firearms and all the nonsense they do there. So it's beyond partisan, and it's even beyond ideological. There's simply the people who want to take guns away from people and they justify and cope however they want, and there's the people that don't, and that's the division there.
100%, and it is interesting, and I'll come back to this in a minute, but the idea that okay, South, everything in the South, the guns all good, guns all free, and you mentioned Florida and Alabama, and it's like, well, you don't get more South than that. Like, you don't, and we mentioned earlier Texas. You, the idea that there's a part of a state that's safe or a county that's safe from these people is just not true. Guns are being attacked. They're being not to be like scare tactic, but they're being attacked right now. There's people right now, this very second, as we record this, as you're listening to it, that are trying to take your guns away. There's people around the world that are pushing for policies trying to get America to swing further into gun control.
Yeah, that's what I always say too, is like, it's obviously on a micro level and even on a kind of mid level. There's battles between capitalism and socialism, of small government and big government, of freedom versus surveillance. All these are going on, but I think like a trend that I notice is that the worst people on the left and the right are trying to turn us into Europe. Like, the right wingers want us to be right wing Europe, and left wingers want us to be left wing Europe. And when you look at that through the context of firearms, there's only one direction that goes.
No, definitely, and surveillance, right? You've got both parties in England that have turned that into a fucking surveillance hellhole.
I've never been more flabbergasted that England is such a surveillance state that they have a reality TV show where they brag about the fact that basically like 80% of the country is covered by surveillance cameras that can be accessed in real time at any moment. And it's like that's
Yeah, that's awful. But one of the benefits of cameras I do want to touch on before we move forward um, is people conservatives that were thought they legitimately had never seen these issues with police and black people. One that comes to mind to me that like a family member was like, yeah, he was a good dude. He did everything right. Was Philando Castile in Minnesota, I believe. Cop pulls him and his girlfriend over. He tells the cop he's got a gun in the car. He reaches for his license and the cop shoots him. And this family member said,
it's important to say that the cop, I think his name was literally Geronimo or some shit like that,
mm-hmm.
was tweaking out from the moment he walked up to his car, visibly shaking, sweating profusely, like he was losing his fucking mind.
Oh, absolutely. And these are the people that are given power to extrajudicially kill people.
Yeah,
And
we're starting to get old. A lot of people are starting to talk to are young, so they might not have been around. But look up the body cam footage and the Facebook Live footage of the Philando Castile shooting, and you'll be like, what the fuck? And it's very important to where that was defended vociferously by like the pro-gun right at the time. To where now, like that's way more of a conflict issue, leaning towards people thinking it's wrong. So we are making progress on this, and that's kind of why I write these papers and talk about this. People are starting to get it.
no, definitely. I think you're right. People should go watch that because that had a profound effect on a lot of conservatives. Seeing this, like he says everything right, the cop is absolutely tweaking off his gourd, and they see someone doing everything right, a guy who's a pillar in his community, working the schools, and you're totally right. The conservative reaction at the time was bad guy. He like talking about he had to get out of the car. Yeah,
He had weed in the car, and he was speeding.
100%. And uh, I'm glad because in that aspect too, you're right. A lot of, especially younger people, uh, may not remember that, but I think it's important to go back and look at that and appreciate as the times change. Right, like obviously horrible and disgusting issue, but it is profoundly important how many people's hearts and minds were changed by that.
And Breonna Taylor is another one that's kind of been forgotten. There's a whole I could do a whole other podcast about what happened to Breonna Taylor and what happened with the BLM movement with Breonna Taylor and her mom and everything. And why like people justifiably and understandably keep talking about George Floyd, but Breonna Taylor has been completely forgotten in that conversation, which it should not happen, and that makes me very upset. But the Breonna Taylor instance is another perfect example. Her boyfriend opened fire on unknown, unannounced men in plain clothes breaking in their front door.
When it's pitch black, essentially.
Yeah, and he walked. Thank God, and that we cycling back to the performative like anti-gun every town, Brady and stuff like that. They'll tweet on Breonna Taylor's anniversary of her death, and I always cook them alive because I'm like, if your laws that you push for every single day actually passed, then Breonna Taylor's boyfriend would be in prison. He wouldn't be free. He'd be in prison if he got your way.
And there would be
which wraps all of this up. That's kind of the underpinning. A lot of black people would be in prison if these people got their way. 100%. It's already happening. But if they went full throttle, a lot of black people would be in prison.
And dead. Like not to be like crass or obtuse or anything, but there would be if every time gun policies were enacted, there would be thousands of Breonna Taylors because
Yes.
cops would not have no fear about going in unannounced. They would again still have no repercussions, and anyone that fought back would be arrested or and in jail. So there's no if they break into your house in the middle of the night, you better have milk and cookies out for them. That's legitimately the awful horrid truth, and it makes me sick. But that's what they want. That's their vision of the future.
Yeah, but to wrap it up, like I said, you're just going to put minorities in prison. Is I think about 6 months ago, it might have been longer than that. There was a altercation in Hawaii, which is rated A by every town. It's their dream. It has everything they could ever want in that state. Of a indigenous Hawaiian family, their next door white neighbor was just a fucking crazy person. And he was doing wild shit. He was like knocking holes in their fence. He was having like playing like loud music in the middle of the night and constantly fucking with them. And one day he just snapped. He showed up to a party of theirs and just opened fire on him. And the guy, he went out and he defended himself. He shot and killed this guy. And Hawaii tried to throw the book at him. So it's like that I because of your audience and who I talk to a lot, it's going to be a lot of left wing people that are still a little more iffy on the gun things. Like that you need to think about the end result of what you're talking about. Of an indigenous Hawaiian family being attacked by a legitimate schizo white guy, and the only thing keeping them from all dying was him pulling out a gun and shooting him. And the policies you support are now trying to throw that indigenous man in prison.
Absolutely. And I think conservatives need to adopt that language, right? I know they hate saying things are racist and hate like even using indigenous at points to yeah, to reject liberal points and to render them moot. You have to use that language.
And that's the whole thing is I'm with you right now. My politics are I don't like cops and I like guns. I have a lot of political opinions on past that, on the left and right. Have very nuanced political perspectives, but I don't care activize or talk about those. I'm just guns and cops. And I think it is more valuable to undercut the largest opposition to gun rights, which is, in my opinion, that there is some bizarre divide between gun rights being a white conservative middle-aged guy thing. And I think the more it becomes not just that, you don't have to. No one needs to be replaced. Guns don't need to change. The culture doesn't need to change. None of that. Be very clear. Just getting people to realize and get into it. The more people realize, the more people that get into it, the more that is undercut, and you just don't have to deal with this problem. That is more important to me than any culture warring nonsense of like, we need to own the chuds with guns, or we don't want these communist, all that culture war nonsense. I hate it. I would rather just more people have them, because the more people that have them, the less of a talking point this becomes, the less of a problem it becomes, the less we have to deal with it, the less my friends and my family and people in my community get put in a cell for a non-inanimate object. And that is the thing I care about, and that's why, I work for one gun org, a very conservative gun org. At the same time, I happily support and often amplify people like Better Way 2A, people like Yellow Para Tactical that are pushing it on the left as well. Tactical Girlfriend. I'm very happy those people exist. I want their audiences to continue to grow. I want guns to not be a topic of political discussion. The day guns are no longer a political dividing line is the day that I quit politics and go and paint happiness in my life. That's where I'm at.
Those miniatures are going to get fucked up if that day ever happens. They are going to get absolutely destroyed. No, and you're totally right, and it's that's why, like, if you hop on either of our pages, at lemon_squirts or at armed joy with a 0, you'll see us and our friends mocking conservatives, libertarians, liberals, obviously, leftists, every part of the political spectrum we have friends in, and we also will mock the anti-gun people in those groups. Just yesterday, I completed a Mags W. I got called a Nazi because of how I criticized Everytown. And
Yeah. And then a couple of weeks before that, we were all being called commie, subversive, blah blah blah, for not wanting to keep guns away from trans people.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. So it's like it is just a gun thing, but I do want to hit on something. I think you skipped over an important point, and that's the fact that once we establish the New World Order, we are going to make everyone do land acknowledgments before they get a gun, though.
No, gun laws. No.
No, they need to do. It's not a law, but it's the land acknowledgement is highly suggested.
No.
I just smiled.
You know who would never lock people in jail for guns?
Mm-hmm.
Our friends at Math Corp. They would never lock people in jail for guns. In fact, they're trying to get people out of jail for guns. And their Sunshine combo meals right now with the rails are the cheapest, highest, great quality, the cheapest available in an industry that's kind of trying to pump up Glock Gen 3 numbers right now. So if you want to build a Glock Gen 3 for the cheap, they have your parts here. They even have milled slides in now. Use code LEMONADE, LEMONAID, to get 10% off. We love the folks at MAV, and they have this cute little ghosty with the rails right here. To kind of transition, okay, I'm going to bring up what I brought prepared. I'm sorry if this is going over. Are you good on time?
I got like 15 minutes.
Okay. I'm gonna hurry. Okay, so we have this from the I'll bring it up here first. So from the Penn State Dickinson Law Review, they were historical firearm licensing and permitting laws. One particular one that caught my eye, and I'd been kind of researching this, is where criteria is different than other gun laws. So many know the 1911 gun law, the Sullivan Act in New York. That's what was covered under Bruin in 2022. So this would have been 1919, 8 years later, pertaining to weapon sellers and buyers. A certain section of the law provided wording for an oath to be signed by the recipient of the license or permit, administered by the clerk of the Superior Court, blah, blah, blah. But the interesting part of this, and how it kind of connects to today, is the oath required that the person be of good moral character, and that the gun permit was to be issued specifically if the applicant convincingly reported the possession of one weapon to be necessary for self-defense. Moreover, the gun had to be purchased from an authorized dealer. So this is the first one I could find in my... I mean, I did quite a bit of research, but that kind of really reflects the gun culture of today, right? These are the arguments every town makes, where you say authorized dealer...
And to be clear, the most shitty, horrible conservatives too. Good moral character one.
Absolutely. And we talked about Illinois earlier. Necessary for self-defense. This whole assault rifle, is it necessary for self-defense argument is still going on, and this was over 100 years ago. And good moral character, and it's the cops deciding who has good moral character. Well, fucking shit. Obviously, go ahead.
And like, you know, it's kind of old history at this point, but it's important to think of pre-Bruin, there was a near limitless drama about New Jersey cops and Illinois cops and California cops, wherever they had this permit to purchase nonsense that existed. And, you know, may issue gun laws of them just taking straight bribes. That's how you got a gun permit in New Jersey. You just paid the county sheriff like $1,000 to get your gun permit. And then you see bizarre things like these small like New Jersey poor communities where the sheriff has like a three-story house and a nice boat and shit. It was bribes. It was all bribes. That was the pre-Bruin world where the cops had the right to to approve or deny you a firearm permit because they felt like it. It was just flagrantly criminal and corrupt behavior.
No, absolutely. And something that is, when you think about that, is kind of what you talked about in New York earlier, is cops are going to take bribes and shake people down, and that's how we transition into gun control is always for the poor, right? If you can't afford to bribe the police, how do you get a gun?
That's great. Bring that up. The whole nonsense that happened that British sword. I don't think it was British. She was like from the States, I think. But the sword account guy going on and being like, well, you don't want to legalize machine guns because it would help the rich more than it would help you. And it's like, well, the rich and only people who currently, no gun law exists that if you have $100,000, you can't get around. And not even like in a shady way, like explicitly legally. You just have to pay the government enough, and you can own like a 150 millimeter howitzer with live explosive ammo. You just have to have enough money for it.
Absolutely. I mean, Eric Prince has a fucking army. He has his own like mercenary group, and like because he has money, and so and of course, what came of this? Obviously, bad things expected. I have if you're on the video, I highly suggest looking at it. Very cool old newspaper here, sourced from this Duke paper by these couple of gentlemen, and this is actually all my sources are from, aside from the pen paper, are from the Duke Center for Firearms Law. So thank you. And in reading their papers, it does come to the same point you mentioned earlier, as far as liberals being uncomfortable with the result of the papers. This is by Amir Ali and Andrew Willinger. So they pulled this up, and they found this from the Wilmington Morning Star in wrong one. Let's see here. The Wilmington Morning Star in what the fuck? Am I a boomer? Oh yeah, I dragged it to the bottom. I'm a boomer. While many articles focused on the potential safety benefits of the law, obviously exactly what they do today, the Wilmington Morning Star in 1919 suggested a relationship between law and race. The paper observed that Wilmington had not faced any race riots, in part because there's every reason to believe that the government of the enactment of 1919 has figured largely in the gradually decreasing use of pistols and other death-dealing instruments. The article could be read to imply that the law was passed in part due to racial tensions, which some believed might erupt into violence without strict regulation of handguns. So it's literally the same shit that group of conservatives for in every town calls for today. Well, the blacks are getting rowdy.
So funny. It's like if we had no race riots because we had police brutality and bullying. That's pretty much the argument being made there when watered down.
No, absolutely. Well, we're not giving them any guns now. You see, they don't have no guns to fight back.
I'm sure the race riots also people there didn't want to do them. I think that's the reason.
Yeah.
I think the fact that we're having racial laws and implementing them in a racist way have nothing to do with the fact that you didn't have race laws. What's the?
It's insane, the logic. And if you just,
I mean, it was 1901, so like not I wouldn't use the phrase "give them credit" or slack or anything. Like that does sound like some shit someone in 1901 would say.
No, absolutely. And at the same time, it is interesting to see the parallels of how that's still reflected today. They use the same language.
I always recommend people go and read the transcripts of the NFA hearing. It sounds like any gun control debate here in Congress or your state house today. Same examples, same language, same threats, quotation. You know, none of this is new. Nothing has changed. If the laws were racist then, the laws are racist now. It's fundamental because nothing about how those laws are enacted, who they target, who enforces them, and how we cope with them has changed from the days people used to point to of that's back then. You know, we're not locking the Black Panthers up now. It's like, well, in the 90s we passed the militia. You know, there was the Militia Act, I don't forget the exact name of that bill that was targeting all of like the Michigan militia and people, stuff like that. That's also when the Black Panthers effectively died because they were made illegal. So it's just think about this shit. Is all I ask people. Think
No,
about the second.
that's it. Just think about it longer than, well, this bad or this. Just dig into it a little bit, for God's sakes, just a tiny bit. Um, and I found this unconnected, so I'm going to kind of connect it for the writers here. The Western Sentinel in Winston-Salem, which I want to note is 3 hours and 200 plus miles away. So this is across the state of North Carolina. Reported in June 1919 that a clerk had told a female permanent applicant that females of Buncombe County cannot secure permits to buy pistols and other firearms, and that this practice had been adopted as a policy. The Hickory Daily Record later went on to say 36 permits issued since the bill had been passed, only 2 were given to women. So at a time when like women's suffrage is a primary issue, and I want to connect this back to the women in New York, right? Like, of course, unarmed women are going to be targeted more. Unarmed women are going to be raped more. Unarmed women are going to be attacked more. Period. End of story. And essentially saying a clerk told a female permanent applicant that they could not secure a permit to buy a pistol. And that really is the whole problem with having someone ask the police being the arbiter of deciding who gets a gun or deciding who gets arrested for maybe looking like they might have a gun. And it really is just indicative of the entire issue with these.
We can take it to immigrants as well. We can add the whole mix of it. Second Amendment Foundation just put out a story yesterday about another ERPO red flag situation where a woman who had trouble speaking English and probably had a thick accent was learning she was an immigrant woman. For some reason, her hospital just assumed that she wanted to kill herself for some reason. So they immediately red flagged her husband and took all of his guns away. And then he's been unable to get those back this entire time. And they even admitted that it was a total misunderstanding. The woman is not a threat to herself whatsoever. That the man is not required. Wait, is that today?
What's up?
I'm really looking at your screen.
Oh no! This is in 2023, so that's why I'm going to kind of connect it here. Total. So in 2023,
more ERPO stuff. A woman in English second language. They freaked out and thought she was dangerous to herself, even though she wasn't. And they immediately went and took all of her husband's guns. They refused to give them back. He keeps trying to push to get them back, and they're threatening to pull his firearms owner permit if he keeps pushing the issue. Women, minorities, immigrants, white guys, everybody. It doesn't matter. Like this is being used in this way.
Absolutely, and I don't want to target Roy Cooper. This isn't Roy Cooper. That's House Speaker Tim Moore. He got it repealed in 2023. So this law was enacted, much like Bruin, over 100 years, and they had to override Roy Cooper's veto. Again, Democrats, modern day Democrats, support this fucking bullshit. Cooper and Democratic lawmakers warned it allows a greater number of dangerous people to obtain weapons. Sure, whatever. And limits law enforcement's ability to prevent them from committing violent crimes. Literally the exact language we were referencing earlier. Like word for fucking word, bar for fucking bar. That's what they do. This is what they're going to do every time. Modern day Democrats supported this racist, sexist, fucking bullshit. And we talked about, I don't want to single out, I want to make it clear, we're not singling out one party or one person with this. It is the entire structure this is built around that feels they have the power to deem if someone is of good moral character, or they can give someone a right to purchase a gun. And real quick, I do want to kind of you to go into your concealed carry, like reciprocity, and what you guys are working toward for that.
So North Carolina, we're pushing for constitutional carry, which that sitting there's enough votes to veto it, but to your point, there's Republican cowards who don't want to do it because they're bought by the sheriffs and the police who don't want constitutional carry because they want the right to arrest people for not having a permit and take bribes and everything we talked about. So that's going on. And then there's a strong push for national constitutional carry, which is a Thomas Massey bill, which would effectively have federal preemption to where you cannot require people to have a permit via approval. That's a fundamental thing. You have to give people a gun if they are legally allowed to own a firearm. You cannot make them go through any nonsense to do it. That's a federal bill, and as you can see, the government shut down for a month, so who knows where that's going to go. We're going to keep hammering on that forever. Constitutional carry as a concept was considered a crazy idea, 15, 20 years ago. And now we have 29 states that do it. And we're bordering on 30. We came really close in Pennsylvania to sneak through. It's literally on a razor's edge in North Carolina. There's talks about introducing it in Wisconsin. The number keeps growing. Now, is that ever going to pass in some place like New York or California or Oregon? Probably not. If there's a federal bill, that might happen. That's why federal bill exists. But we're approaching a world where you don't need to do the stupid permitting nonsense. You never should have done it in the first place. And that's what I do to push against the black pilling. Definitely gun people. We hyper focus on black pilling and fear mongering a lot, and it's definitely not all unjustified. But we don't really cherish the wins enough. And I think it is important to go to Wikipedia and look at the right to carry U.S. map and look how bad it used to be like 30 years ago, where there was multiple states where you were not legally allowed to carry a handgun. Most states were made issue. And now all states are theoretically shall issue, like places like Hawaii and New York and California. Fuck games, but in theory, everywhere is shall issue. And over half the country is constitutional carry. And I think that's important for people to realize and keep pushing for, because that seems very achievable. To get to the point where when you look at stop and frisk, when you look at a lot of stuff like what's going on in Chicago right now. A lot of the racist parts of gun laws tie to the permit. We're ever closer to getting rid of that entirely and just not having to deal with that part of gun laws.
And I do want to explain that a little bit real quick. Is in some people in your state, it may not, depending on where you're listening to this, you may think of, concealed carry as I take a class, or I I send in my information and they send me it. No, this is in many states, in counties in those states, you have to physically go to a sheriff's office to request that they give you a permit that you then take to the FFL to purchase your gun with. So you have to actually physically go to these places. And obviously that's racist and sexist, because it's like, what woman or person of color or marginalized person is going to want to go to the sheriff's office, period. But to ask, can I please have a gun if I'm really good? If I'm really good, can I please have a gun? And so it's so important to understand that difference and push back against that, you're right, and appreciate the wins. While a lot of our friends and comrades are in jail right now in a cage, many are recording videos, shooting guns into trees right now, shooting guns in their house right now. There's a video on the internet that someone is recording this very second where they're inhaling so much lead it would blow your mind. So it is very important, and if you're in those free states, I encourage you to speak up for your friends that are stuck in these hellholes. It's so easy to write off, to say, oh, California, you live in California, just move. You live in New York, just move. And I think that's giving up a little too easily.
We would have just fled every single place that there's a problem. then we wouldn't have got the wins that we got because everywhere used to have a problem.
No, absolutely. Stand and fight.
When I was growing up, there was an assault weapons ban. The vast majority of states were bans on carrying or a main issue, and now there's not an assault weapons ban. Now there's FRTs. Now we're about to get $0 tax stamps. Like we are winning this issue. We are winning this debate. People on the actual left are largely abandoning this more and more every day. Liberals are starting to loosen up on it more and more with Kamala Harris on the block and every town doing a gun safety course. And conservatives are starting to get more hip and wise to the nonsense their own side polls, whether it's in general or on the racial issue. So we are winning. It's very important to remember that. But it is not the time to let up on the gas because it is always one bad shooting or one stupid thing from us losing all this again. So we just need to keep it up until, like I said, the day that I can retire from politics completely and not have to worry about anything. Guns is no longer a political issue.
We pray for that day. Well, you know what else we didn't have growing up is the Control Pew Getting Started guide. If you want to know how to print a gun, you can. If you want to buy some cool merch, you can. You see my little AV is I'm pointing at this approval form from a sheriff. Oh, soy jacking at it in my Control Pew Guide shirt. Use code, and I actually flipped the codes earlier. This is so at controlpew.com. Use code lemonade AID for 5% off. My code at MAF, which Pew greatly gave me, is Lemon Snow Cone. So it's Lemon SNOW code. I love Pew. He's funny.
And while you're on Pew's website, if you go into that search product and type Armed Joy.
Ooh, yes.
I have a very sick gun clean mat / mouse pad that you should totally buy. I don't know if you did the 0 or
the Y. Let's see. But it is very sick. Let's see here. The computer's thinking.
It's Pew's website. We'll get on it again.
Yeah. Wow, Pew, look at your site. Here, let's go. Is it under swag maybe? Pew, what is going on?
I think if you scroll down cleaning mats, you see on the left under swag.
Oh, yeah. I am a boomer as well. Let's see here. Cleaning mats. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. There it is. Right
there it is. We got the gray, but the color is just so good.
Yeah, you get one of these and put some money in my pocket and get a real sick, insurrectionary anarchist, gunsmith cats.
Yes. Yes. If you're going to join the Boogaloo, you have to get this. They actually, after your land acknowledgement, they check and make sure you have one of these. And if you don't, you get kicked out. You have to go join the Gretchen Whitmer FBI Discord if you don't have one of these. So,
everyone who doesn't do a land acknowledgement is a fed.
Yes, everyone who doesn't do a land acknowledgement is a fed. So I want to see all the land acknowledgements in the comments. But check out this very sick. It has the anarchy symbol. It has Control Pew on the side. Just very sick. Wearing the nods. Highly recommend getting one of those. And when you do, use code lemonade AID for 5% off. And is there anything you wanted to plug, Mags? Anything you wanted to plug before we hop off here, brother?
No, not really. I will give a exclusive teaser to you. Pay attention to the National Association for Gun Rights account in the next couple months because there will be something 3D printed related that I think people will be very interested in. That's all I will say.
Ooh, okay, we like that. Wow, Mag's making money moves. We love to see it. Yeah, everyone go follow the National Association for Gun Rights. They were the one that really led the charge. Now, some others did as well. The NRA eventually capitulated on the trans gun stuff, but great people work over there. Multiple people that stand up on their personal accounts as well and say, hey, we're not taking guns from anybody. Simple as. Simple as. Go ahead.
Keep cutting. Keep cutting you off. I'm sorry. No, yeah, it's like they employ someone like me. They're very smart. Obviously, they're very conservative work. They stand by that stuff, but they have principles, and I respect that. That's why I'm comfortable working with them. So, might not be everyone that would listen to this cup of tea, and I understand why not. But that's fine. But I respect them, and I'm happy to work there. So, and I only speak for myself on all of this and everything I've said, but I wouldn't get in trouble for saying any of this either, and that's important to me. So.
No, definitely, and principles are the most important thing. As you look to make, as anyone looks to make alliances in guns on the left and right, I want to close with look for principled people. If they aren't going to give up guns, but they don't pray to the same person as you, if they aren't going to give up guns, but they uh, eat at a different time than you, or wear different clothes than you, who gives a shit? Just nut up and be one with the people that don't want to get rid of their guns, will not give up their guns, won't let you be disarmed. And we will see you guys next week. Talk to you later. Bye bye.